Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Wanda Curley, and I'm your authority on project, program, and portfolio management. This podcast is brought to you by PM Powered, a consulting firm in project, program, and portfolio management. Today, I've got some interesting articles that kind of follow the gamut in a lot of areas. But initially, I'm going to talk to you about the Big Dig, which I started last week, but I wanted to add a little bit this week. Then I'm going to talk about some IT stuff, and then the future of the working environment, and then how do we make AI ethical, and why do we need to make AI ethical? So let's first talk about the Big Dig. I wanted to talk about the early planning and to look at it, that it was kind of set up for failure. So it took a lot of time before they even got any funding for it. So the idea was conceived in the 1970s by the Boston Transportation Planning Review, and it was to replace the elevated and rusting 6-lane central artery. It was a massive undertaking even then, but then in 1982, the Big Dig finally became a project with environmental impact studies starting in 1983. After years of extensive lobbying for federal dollars, a 1987 public works bill was appropriated for the Big Dig by U.S. Congress. It was vetoed by Ronald Reagan, but the Congress overrode the veto and the money was given to Boston anyway. And this is where the setup for failure comes in. So instead of the Boston Transportation highway system taking over it was taken over by the Metropolitan Highway System, and they transferred responsibility to them. And this was a newly created government organization. And the Big Dig was taken away from the Massachusetts Highway Department and the Massachusetts Governor's Office and to the Massachusetts Turnpike Authority, and was given to this Metropolitan Highway System. The MTA, which had little experience in managing and undertaking of the scope and magnitude of the CAT project, as it was officially called. It was not called the Big Dig. They hired a joint venture to provide preliminary designs, manage design consultants, and construction contractors. They tracked the project's costs and schedule. They would advise the MTA on project decisions, and in some instances, act as the MTA's representative. Now, the MTA was actually the Metropolitan Highway System, but it was ended up calling the MTA. Eventually, the MTA combined some of its employees with the joint venture employees in an integrated project organization. This is never a good idea. This was intended to make management more efficient, but it hindered MTA's ability to independently oversee project activities because MTA and the joint venture had effectively become partners in the project. So there was no oversight of this project, and that was part of the issues that they had with this. So from the very beginning, the Big Dig was set up for failure. So we'll look at more of that later on in the future podcasts. So let's jump to the next one. This one's is about IT project management. And while it's a white paper to sell Workfront, I found it very, very interesting because they actually did survey some companies and IT project managers, and they have statistics about the unnerving cost of IT project management. And I was surprised to see that there's still some of the same things that I suffered when I did IT project management. So let's go to the first thing. The 5 things of project management that shows that IT project management is broken is 1, constant status inquiries, poor or no visibility into your team's workload, multiple disconnected tools, requests from everywhere, and mixed methodologies. The only one that I probably didn't have was mixed methodologies, and that has to do with Agile and Waterfront. So let's get to talking about these a little bit. So constant status inquiries. I know when I was running projects, I was constantly getting requests for how the project is doing and what's going on within the project. And that came from middle management, senior management, people on the project that just wanted to know, others that were outside the project but had an interest in the project because they were either had milestones that they were depending on. So there were constant inquiries. So it said project leaders spend up to 10 hours per week in meetings, and 90% report that more than half of that time was wasted. And office workers are spending an average of 4 hours per week in meetings with a mutual feeling that more than half of that time was spent unnecessarily. And for status updating, the majority of project managers report they spend between 21% to 30% of their time updating status reports, tracking down updates, and attending status meetings. I did the same thing. It was terrible trying to put a status report. That's up to 12 hours per week spent on status updating, an incredible cost to the organization's bottom line. Yep, I totally agree with that. And they have some statistics here that I'm not going to go into, where they show and break down all these problems with meetings and updating status reports. So the next one is no visibility into your team's workload. That was a hard thing for me as well. I could never understand what was going on with my team unless I went up and talked to them individually. And I shouldn't have had to do that. There should have been a tool I could have gone into. So it says that IT project managers today report that there's a lack of understanding their team's current workload and capacity in the second biggest, and capacity is the second biggest challenge in their project management process. And with more than 80% of surveyed companies using spreadsheets to manage their work, it's not surprising we're not utilizing our teams in their true capacity. On average, workers are spending up to 2.5 hours per day, not even per week, per day, searching for and gathering information for projects and work. Among the culprits, email. 1/3 of project managers admit they use a mix of email and spreadsheets as their primary project management tools. It's hard for me to believe that that's still going on, but I'm sitting on a project now, and I would say that's probably how we do it. That and PowerPoints. We use a lot of PowerPoints. So let's, which is number 4, requests from everywhere. Absolutely, I got requests from everywhere. The average IT organization spends between 45 to 55% of their time on unplanned and urgent activities. How many times are you a project manager and you're asked to do this little task that takes you away from the project, but it's urgent and it's got to be done now? I'm sure that's happened to all of us. Well, it happens a lot in IT because things break in IT. Things need to be done immediately. An update or a change needs to be done. There's a change that needs to be done right now that wasn't even known about. So those are all of the unplanned work, or a system goes down and you have to work on it. There's a lot of ad hoc work requests or ad hoc meetings and ad hoc conversations. More than 1/3 of all meetings are ad hoc. 67% of employees report that more than half of the meetings they attend are not of any value, and 28% of the average office workers day is spent dealing with unnecessary interruptions. I've actually talked about this from a neuroscience perspective. If you sit in a cubicle environment and you have constant interruptions, your mind can't handle all that multitasking, and that's what it's called, multitasking. And if you're face down, very focused and trying to get something done, if you have these constant interruptions, it makes it a lot harder to get it done. So let's look at the final one. And it's mixed methodologies. And I talked about that a little bit. That's where we're using Agile and Waterfall at the same time. The multiple methodologies approach to work is increasing every year. In a recent survey, 39% of project managers reported that more than 75% of their projects are completed in Waterfall, while 58% report that they work on projects that include Agile methodologies. This is positive growth between two worlds that haven't been in parallel in the past. However, there are many growing pains. A shocking 33% of project managers who mix Agile and Waterfall are using separate tools for each methodology. Can you imagine that? So if you have a mixture of Agile and Waterfall on a project, you have to use different methodologies for your Agile parts and different tools for your Waterfall part. That's got to be mind-blowing. 48% of project managers using separate tools to manage mixed methodologies compile their data in spreadsheets, while 19% double enter data into two systems. Clearly, we still have a problem. Yes, absolutely. Now, the rest of this white paper goes into why you should use Waterfront, and I'm not advocating that. There are plenty of tools out there that can handle all of these. It's just a matter of getting your organization to find the right tool for your company. Don't fall into the trap that you think that a tool is a silver bullet. There will always be some things that you'll have to do outside of the tool because it doesn't handle what you need for your organization. So just understand that there's no silver bullet out there. Okay, let's go to the next one. And this actually talks about the future of work, and it comes from Forbes magazine, and I found it very interesting because it says the dynamics of how we work are going to be changing, and I already see that in the marketplace. So it talks about the future of work, and it's humans plus gigs plus robots are the new blended workforce. For those of you who don't understand the gigs moniker, it just means that people that are contractors that come in and do something and go out. It could be for a short time or it could be for a longer time, but those are consultants basically, but they call them gigs because you go in for a gig and then you're out of the organization. So the new workforce is going to be a blended workforce, and it says nearly 90% of managers and executives surveyed by MIT Sloan Management Review anticipated that their industries will be disrupted by digital trends to a great or moderate extent, but only 44% say their organizations are adequately preparing for the disruption. That is mind-boggling. If you know that this is coming, why aren't you preparing for it? And so she talks to a leader at Infosys, and they talk about this new revolution. So the first thing they talk about in the emerging trend of the future workforce is, like I said, the blended workforce of human gigs plus robots will be the new normal. And I see it in the organization where I'm a consultant right now. They don't have too much, they do have some robotics in their laboratories, but they don't have it out on the floor. But I think we're going to see that, or artificial intelligence coming out. So the movement for homogeneous workforce of FTEs to a heterogeneous workforce of humans on the premises working in tandem with a virtual pool of gig talent, me as a consultant, and robots will be the new normal. Think of your future workforce as a blended of humans, gig workers, and robots. So this is what we're going to be seeing in the future. There was a CEO of a large freight company, and he was accustomed to spending 6 hours every week reviewing a 220-page PDF on the state of the business and competition. Can you imagine doing that every week? Today, this process has been transformed by Infosys. So a contractor came in, gigs, into an executive dashboard similar to a pilot cockpit, providing real-time data and insights on the company's financials, future sales, orders, and their completion. So the executive dashboard is delivered on a mobile device that enables anywhere, anytime access to data for decision support and reviews. So Kumar from Infosys sees a future where more senior executives leverage gig workers to create the data and machines capable of providing real-time insights so strategic decisions are amplified. And then he says we're going to more of a Z-shaped skills. Right now we work in a T-shaped environment where we have depth, both a depth of learning and a breadth of skills. But our depth is it's now a little bit more important than the breadth. He says now we need to go to a Z-shaped skill. And in the Z shape, the top part of the Z is creativity. He's saying that workers need to be creative. How many times have I told you that CEOs and senior management in their organization doesn't think that they have creative workers. And I said, yes, they do have creative workers. They just don't know how to harness it. And you can do that through neuroscience. You can make people a little bit uncomfortable to make them more creative by putting them in a different mode of thinking in their organization. And I'm not going to get into that, but there are different ways that you can make people think differently, and that makes them more creative. Then the slanted part of the Z is the business and digital literacy. You've got to understand the business, and you've got to understand the digital landscape of that business. And then the bottom part of the Z is collaboration, critical thinking, change management, communication, cultural fluency. Those are things that we need to have that we don't have. And those of us that are contractors or gigs need to be able to take that in quickly and understand it so that we can deliver what we are there for, whether it be a short time or a longer time. So he talks about this in reflecting on the importance of Z-shaped skills. And Kumar sees creativity and critical thinking as key human capabilities needed in the workplace of the future. And in fact, he talks about Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs once said, the Macintosh turned out so well because the people working on it were musicians, artists, poets, and historians who also happened to be computer scientists. So can you imagine why the Macintosh was so great? Can you imagine if we harnessed those same different creativities of different people in the workplace? Well, that's exactly what's done. Infosys has partnered with the Rhode Island School of Design, and they've also partnered with many community colleges as an example of creating a workforce with skills at the intersection of design and technology and industry. And what Infosys is going to do with the RISD, or the Rhode Island School of Design, is teach them how to be design coders and such, be in the area of IT, so that the goal of RISD partnership is to identify talent with the desired Z-shaped skills, combining design, humanities, liberal arts, public policy, economics, and engineering skills. Can you imagine if you had that education? And it says here, Infosys is also creating alliance with community colleges to develop a more inclusive talent pool. So can you imagine bringing in partnerships between the Rhode Island School of Design and community colleges and creating that creativity in your workforce? I think it's just amazing that they're able to harness that. And finally, they're talking about the democratization of technology skills will blur the lines between white collar, blue collar, and new collar jobs. Everybody has to have access to data. And it was going to make us all more equal, whether you have a college degree or not. Knowledge is power, and now all the data is going to be available to everybody in the organization as long as they know how to capture it and harness it. And that's what creative organizations need to do. They need to teach everybody in the organization to capture and harness the data that they need, or data that they might be interested in to learn about. More creative. We need to do that in all of our organizations. And finally, he will become the evangelist for a growth mindset. Absolutely. If we don't have CEOs that don't have this growth mindset, then the organization is going to be staggered. So Kumar from Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, says the following, that to build a culture of learn-it-alls rather than know-it-alls. Remember, he says that we have to create learn-it-alls, those of us that want to learn different things constantly. It's just like being a learning machine. We want to learn and create, and I always call it lifelong learning, that we want to be able to learn things differently and all the time, and be able to be creative so that we know that. So CEOs need to harness that and push that in their organization. So if we have to use robots, let's also talk about AI, because AI is very not cumbersome, but we don't understand what AI does. So Singularity Hub wrote a little article on, to be ethical, AI must become explainable, and how do we get there? today people that actually create AI don't even understand how the AI machines come um, to the decision that it has come to. We as humans make decisions just automatically without even thinking about it. They use the example of a soccer player. A soccer player passes a ball to somebody that's open, and they know that instinctively. They know that because uh, it becomes rote memory. And then they know if they have a soccer ball at their feet that they have to kick it or do something with it or pass it and that comes instinctively. But those that create AI don't understand how AI is coming to its final conclusion to do something. For example, pass a soccer ball or to dribble the soccer ball. So we have to figure out a way that AI can tell us that how it came to harness the decision it makes. So explainability comes in when the system can say, I saw A, B, and C, and based on that, decided X, Y, and Z. And right now, AI can't do that for us. AI can't tell us why it came to the decision that it came to. So once we understand how it comes to the decision, then ethics can be brought into AI. And we need to we're accountable beings. We as human beings are accountable and we're responsible for the choices we make. Bringing in tech or AI in a battlefield doesn't strip away the meaning and the accountability. So if we bring in AI, we are still accountable for what's going on. And we need to be able to make AI understand that as well. We don't want a scenario where AI is taking the decision making away from humans. AI needs to help us with decisions and give us alternatives, but it shouldn't strip away our ethical being to do decisions. So there's a U.S. Department of Defense released in 2018 artificial intelligence strategy last month. It includes developing a robust and transparent set of principles for defense AI, investing in research and development for AI that's reliable, secure, continuing to fund the research and explainability, advocating for a global set of military AI guidelines, and finding ways to use AI to reduce the risk of civilian casualties and other collateral damage. So even the U.S. Department of Defense understands that AI has got to be just a tool that helps us make decisions, and it should be a partnership with us, and that it can't be overarching and take over the decision making from humans. Now, this is for value add. There are decisions that AI can do that we really as humans don't need to do that. It's the ones that have ethical decisions in it that we have to be able to either build it into the machine, into AI, or allow us to do it. Now, that is somewhat a slippery slope with self-driving cars because there's AI involved with that, and I have brought up the ethical dilemmas that we have in self-driving cars. You know, do you hit the older person or do you hit the young person? And the ethics depends on the culture that you go to. So there's a lot of cultural implications with AI that drive ethics. So stay tuned because I think we're going to see ethics being brought into AI, but it's too soon to understand that. And it's going to drive every part of business as well, not only the Department of Defense, but our business environments too. So I'm Wanda Curley, and I am your authority on project, program, and portfolio management. I hope you have found these articles interesting, and if you were a project manager on any of these items, I'd love to speak to you. Please send me an email at wanda@pmpowered.com. This podcast was brought to you by PM Powered, a consulting company in project, program, and portfolio management. If it's the first time you've seen my podcast, please go to PM Current and follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. I'd love to have you look at my previous podcasts. Again, if you're a project manager or somebody that's interested in any of these things and you would like to have a discussion with you, I'd love to have you on my podcast. I'm Wanda Curley again. Have a very blessed and safe week, and I'll talk to you next Monday.